Hello and welcome to the channel. Today what we're going to talk about is managing RPA virtual machines using Azure Logic Apps automation tasks. Let's go. So a little backstory on this particular scenario. So I was working with a colleague, Matthew Farmer. We needed to go ahead and to create some load for Power Virtual Agents. He works on a lot of our analytics investments on the starter kit side of things. And so we needed to generate, some load so that he could go ahead and test out his data pipelines. And so we actually ended up using RPA to go do that. So we had a few machines. We'd go ahead, we'd execute a script, go through a whole chatbot sort of use case, like trigger phrases, and be able to answer the questions that are part of that specific topic, and just generate some load so he could validate his pipelines. And so naturally, you've got VMs here in Azure. Naturally, there's a cost associated with it. We did have it running during the week, but during the weekend, we turned it off just to save some money. And actually, Azure Logic Apps and these automation tasks actually helped us with managing those compute instances so that we can go ahead and turn the machines on, turn the machines off from that perspective. So for those that may not be familiar, when you go ahead and stop a machine and deallocate the resources, you don't actually pay for the compute inside of Azure. Naturally, there's still storage costs, but compute does represent a significant chunk of that bill. And so this just allows us to save these things. And this isn't the only way to go and solve this problem. We do have other automation opportunities such as Azure Runbooks that do exist that allow you to do this, but that's additional skill sets that you need to go ahead and understand in order to go ahead and use those specific features. Me sort of being in Power Automate and Azure Logic Apps and BizTalk back in the day, like this is sort of feels like home for me. And so this is a very simple way to be able to go ahead and to be able to manage your machines, especially on a smaller scale, like perhaps this wouldn't scale if you had thousands of machines. You'd want a centralized repository to sort of orchestrate this. But for like individual machines, I think this is a really simple and easy to use option. Now, there are some costs associated with the Azure Logic Apps. Naturally, it's going to run to go do this, but we're now talking about consumption-based charges. So essentially like an action. You can go ahead and look that up in the Azure calculator, but we're talking about like fractions of a penny to go do this. So there's still a tremendous amount of ROI that we can achieve by doing this. And the way that the Logic Apps team has set this up is they use templates, and they're actually very similar in conceptually to the templates that we find in Power Automate. So you can go to the template gallery and find contextually aware use cases that you can go ahead and lean on. Same sort of idea on the Logic App side itself. So these are some of the call them out of the box templates that do exist, and you can see that they're very specific to Azure. And what you'll find is that the way to sort of configure these is in the context of that specific resource in Azure itself. So if I'm going to try to go ahead and provision one of these for virtual machines, I'm going to need to go to the virtual machine, and then we're going to find a little menu there for task automation that's going to allow us to go ahead and introduce these. And I'll show you all of that as well. Now, this essentially table is a little bit out of date. I did notice Clemens Vaster's tweet during Ignite that the Azure messaging team has also created some support for these automation templates as well. So if you wanted to be able to replicate data from one service bus queue to another service bus queue, you could go ahead and do so by quickly implementing one of these templates and then being able to go ahead and use it. So let's jump into the demo. I'll show you exactly how you can go ahead and set this up. And we're going to focus on starting a virtual machine. And then we're also going to talk about deallocating a virtual machine. Now, this is where you will get the cost savings, is you need to be able to deallocate. It's not enough just to power off the virtual machine. You do need to deallocate it to free up those resources so other people in the Azure cloud can use them. And as a result, other people can go pay for them. So let's go ahead, let's jump into the demo and see how this all works. Okay, so I'm in the Azure portal. I've got a machine, so a virtual machine that's already provisioned that I've been using. And if we scroll down on the left-hand side here, we're going to see automation, and then we're going to see tasks in preview. And so this is where we can go ahead and add a task that's related, contextually aware of our virtual machine. So everything that runs in this context. And so what we can do is we can go ahead and add a task and select a template, right? So if we wanted just to get a monthly report, an email for the cost of this resource, we could go ahead and provision this. As mentioned before, we're going to focus on these two templates itself. So I can go ahead and click on Start. Now I do need to go ahead and provide some connections. If I already have connections in place, great. I can go ahead and use those, much like you would expect to see in other Power Automate or Logic Apps experiences. So those are the two connections we need to create, and it's because the template will go ahead and use the Azure Virtual Machine connector, plus there's an email option, the ability to send out an email. Now, here's where we'd go ahead and configure our machine, or our task rather. So I can call this, go ahead and then select, our specific calendar and when we'd want this to go ahead and run. And then if we want to have a notification, we could go ahead and provide our email address, and then we'll go ahead and get a notification. So what's also interesting about this is that as we're filling this out, the template is actually creating parameters, and we'll see that in the Logic app itself, where these values are being parameterized. And so at this point, we can go ahead and click on create, and that's it. Like it's that simple to go ahead and to create these automation tasks. And that deallocate is exactly the same way. You just provide schedule when you want to stop it. So I'm just going to delete this, and we'll take a look at existing tasks that have already been created. Now, what is a little bit interesting about this experience is that to go ahead and find these Logic apps, you're going to want to come to here. You're going to want to come to the machine, select the tasks, and then go ahead and select the runs. So for example, if we wanted to see if this had run in the past, we could go ahead and click on runs and then see a very familiar experience around run history and the ability to go ahead and check out when it ran, was it successful, and here we can see that we've got that email notification happening. Now, if you wanted to make changes, and you can make changes, we've got two options, edit inline or open in Logic Apps. So we click on this open in Logic Apps, and this is where we can go ahead and tweak this. So maybe we want to add additional steps. Maybe we want to go ahead and send out an approval to Teams or something like that. We could go ahead and do so as well. So these are extensible. And in this case, these are those parameters that we talked about. It's going to go ahead and pull out that subscription ID, the resource group, and the resource VM. Once again, everything's contextually aware, so that's how it's able to go ahead and do so. And then what's going to happen is once that completes, we've got essentially configure run after here, where it's going to say, like, if it fails, run this branch. If it's successful, run this branch. And here we've got that notify parameter that was set. So if we did want to notify people and we configured an email address, we'd be able to go ahead and do so. And here we're going to pass in that email parameter that was collected previously. So this was the failed email. This is the success email. And as you can see here, you can go ahead and make changes as necessary in order to go ahead and sort of tailor it to your own experiences. So that's how you go ahead and create the start. If we go ahead and look at the stop, same experience. We go ahead, we provide our connections. Then we can go ahead and we can set up our schedule and basically then create and provision it. Same sort of experience. We can go ahead and look at the runs, see that it successfully stopped the VM, and then same thing, we'd have the ability to go ahead and open up in Logic Apps as well, if there was changes that were needed from that perspective. Now, we're not going to go ahead and run this in order to wait for a machine to start and stop. That's not all that interesting, but I do want to go ahead and show you the emails that were generated from these specific executions. Okay, and here we go. So we've got the startup email, just indicating that our machine was successfully started, and we've got just the default text that's set up here, and then we've got the shutdown. Same idea. When the machine shuts down successfully, go ahead and send out an email there. And once again, maybe you want to change it. Maybe you want to use Teams. Maybe you want to use text messaging. Kind of up to you in terms of how to best communicate. So yeah, that's the demo itself. So quite, as you saw, very easy to set up. And if you're familiar with Logic Apps or Power Automate, it'll be very familiar in terms of how you view run history and make changes as well. So thanks again for checking out another video on the channel. If you're not following me on Twitter, go ahead and find me at Wearzy. And naturally, you're on YouTube already. Like, subscribes, comments, always welcome. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week on the channel. Take care.